Hi there, friends. This is Brent Heuris, Productivity Coach. The title of this video is Frictionless Creative Output, and we're going to discuss what it would take to get you in a place where you have frictionless creative output. So it's probably self-evident what I'm talking about when I say that, but I'm referring to when you are able to approach your work in such a way where you can just sit down and do it. If you have, say, writer's block or musician's block or artist's block, or if you just find that there's tons and tons of interference or mental, emotional, psychological shit that just gets in the way of you doing your work, whether it makes you feel bored or jittery, or it distracts you, or you just maybe you forget to do the thing, you just always forget, you always say you'll do it, you never get around to actually doing it. So all of these fall under the general umbrella of interference, of blockage, of creative blockage, and of friction. And so what we're going to talk about is how to dissolve this blockage. There's another play here, which is, so there's blockage and then there's friction. And friction is when we're actually doing the work. So say we have some sort of creative output, we're creating something, we're writing something, we're working on our business, we're doing something for our job. And as we're doing it, there's sort of a difficulty that we're passing through in order to do it. It's not fun. It feels like a drag. Time is slowing down. We're feeling frustrated. We're having such a hard time getting through what we're getting through. We're just watching the clock and we're not even really happy with our work. We're not sure if our work is good. And everything's just kind of gnarly about the creation process. And so when we have an experience like that, it can be said that we're having friction. We're experiencing friction in the creative process. So a lot of people don't realize that friction can be released. It actually can be dissolved. You can bring it out of your life and make it so that your creative output is frictionless. And what people assume instead is that the friction is just part of the furniture of your reality, so there's nothing that can be done about it. And instead what you have to do is double down on your willpower, and you have to work harder, and you have to try harder and push harder, and get all this effort in. And so you see people say on discipline boards or message boards such as Reddit asking about how can I get myself to push, why do I keep failing myself, and you can hear all the frustration in their voice as they're writing. You can imagine their voice. And so all of that sort of point of view falls under productivity 1 as opposed to productivity 2. So this is a very, very important differentiation that I made in my earlier video on new school versus old school productivity. So it's about 5 videos ago. And so if you want a really cleaner, more holistic, updated idea of what productivity is, then I suggest you watch that video, because it's a really enormously important shift on the subject of productivity. But for our purposes here, we're going to discuss how to eliminate friction. So what I'll do, the way this video is going to be laid out, is I'm going to discuss the theory of it, how it works, kind of what's going on underneath, what's kind of going on under the hood, how to fix it in theory, and then I'll take you through the actual steps of how to do it. And what I'll actually do is I have a list of 8 examples of specific reasons why we have blockages, and I'll speak to them and I'll see if I can debunk them super quick, so that if any of them actually apply to you, then we can actually do real live work on you, so that you can actually exit this video more clear, with a cleaner channel of creative output, just as a result of watching this video. So if you're watching this video passively, then you'll probably receive a certain amount of that benefit. It will be above 0, so it won't be nothing, but it won't be the whole thing. But if you're just kind of sitting and sort of listening with the bulk of your attention, then that's how you'll get the most benefit out of this video. So, obviously it's up to you. One way that I listen to these types of videos is I'll play maybe Sudoku or something while I'm listening to it. And that way, if something in me feels fidgety, I can kind of have something to do with my hands, but I can still pay a lot of attention. Also, I just love Sudoku. I just love going deep into the theory of it. So we'll have a whole video about that later, I promise, on Sudoku. So creative output, creative friction. First thing to realize and accept is that it is in fact possible for you to have flawless, frictionless creative outflow. There are musicians and artists and people and producers of content who are totally comfortable showing up and making work, completing the work, and then releasing it to the public with the intention of them seeing and experiencing that art. It's very, very common for artists and creators to experience friction, and it can be like really kind of like intense friction, or it can be like really light and not such a big deal. But there do exist certain examples of people that experience either zero friction or barely any friction at all. One artist that I reference a lot and who definitely falls in this category is Jacob Collier, the musician. So if you look him up and watch YouTube videos of his creation process. So he has a wealth of videos where he actually makes music live for people to see. And you can just see that the lack of self-consciousness, the willingness to make mistakes, the willingness to be imperfect, the willingness to mess up or to have something that doesn't sound good, not intimidated by the prospect of embarrassment or failure or disappointment. So none of these things are at play, just a free willingness to just kind of create and see what happens. And his process is so free that I find I can watch his videos and then I can move into creation like a lot more easily, just like riding on his coattails. And it kind of sets a standard for, oh, like all creation should be like this. So the very first thing to really establish in this conversation is that it is possible for you. It's not that creative friction has to be part of your life. It's not. And if you're convinced that it is, then you've been lied to. You've been bamboozled. So let's flip that falsehood on its face and let's really open up to the possibility right now that you can be a prolific creator who has a really clear channel of communication from their creativity. My model on how creativity works is as follows. When we create something, and if there's a quality about it that feels really original, like you hear a song or you see, you write an article, you read an article or read a book, and you're reading this or viewing it or listening to it, and you're just like, where on earth did this come from? How did a person make this? How did a person even think of this? Or even a meme, like a really kind of like hilarious and absurd meme that you see on the internet, and you're like, this is fantastic. How did this even come into being? Well, I'm going to stop saying that this is just my opinion. It's just my opinion, but I'm convinced of this. It comes from a location that is beyond your own mind. It comes from behind your mind. It comes from a deeper reservoir of resourcefulness and creativity and wisdom in us that all of us have access to. And there's a bottomless, sort of fathomless element to this wellspring of creativity. You can bring any question or project or idea to it, or any request, and if you orient yourself properly toward it, you can receive back whatever you need. You can receive back like answers to questions. This is how many scientists purportedly come up with all sorts of amazing answers to questions that they've been really tussling with for a long time. And just a lot of beautiful, fresh, original stuff comes from there. And the whole key is being able to properly access this wellspring of creativity. So you have such a wellspring of creativity, and it goes as deep as you want. And so the whole game is opening up this channel so that it's not constricted, so that it's really wide and open, and that you can allow it to create through you, and you can allow yourself to be the vessel of this creation. For example, as I'm giving you this video, I have an outline. I have some predetermined thought and points that I want to touch on as I give this to you. But at the same time, it's just only a few words on my outline, and there's like all this like kind of space between the grid work of the outline where I'm just allowing what feels appropriate to say to kind of come up, and I share it with you. And even though some of these thoughts I'm sharing are pre-thought thoughts, I've never quite brought this meta level of clarity on this subject to the world before. So we're experiencing this anew together as I make this video for you. And so that's the creation process. So yeah, so number one is you have this reservoir of wisdom. It's available to you, and it should be frictionless. And I forget number two. Number two is we make the mistake of thinking that we need more willpower when in fact we need less friction. So this is what I mentioned a little bit earlier. So I would like for you as of now to really let go of this idea that you're failing, that you're not trying hard enough, and really letting go of this mentality that comes from productivity one, the mindscape of productivity one, which says, I need to whip myself into submission. I need to beat myself down. I need to control myself. I need to be in perfect control of my behavior. I need to set regimens and keep a tight leash, a tight lock and key on myself, and that way I can get the most done in this lifetime. So letting go of all of this force energy and all of this like failure thinking, if you are unable to exert this amount of control under yourself, because it's impossible and it's not even preferable anyway. And instead focusing on removing friction so that the whole process of creating whatever it is that you're creating is lubricated and easy and just joyful and expansive and with like lower on the level of significance. So it's not so heavy and significant and high stakes, like, oh my God, I hope I don't fail. Like arriving at that kind of a orientation towards creative output, so it's without friction. Number three being friction is created whenever we're pushing forward and pulling back. This is a really profound point that I've been reflecting on a lot more recently, which is the level of intention. What are we doing on the level of intention? And in order to discuss this particular point of frictionless creativity, we need a lot of honesty. A lot of honesty. Because we can very, very easily bamboozle ourselves. We can lie to ourselves, and we will miss the profound benefit of this one question of where are we pushing and pulling at the same time. I don't know if this is true. It sounds like it's true. In karate, you know how they're always like breaking bricks and boards. Like, you know, you punch through a board and you break through. They say that the way you're able to actually break the board is by overriding your tendency to want to pull your punch. Because like psychologically, when you're punching towards a wooden board, there's a sense of, I don't want to hurt my fist. I don't want to hurt myself. So you kind of don't really punch all that hard because you don't want to hurt yourself. And that makes perfect sense. But in order to break the board, you have to override that sort of self-preservation sense and punch through. So you're aiming to punch all the way through the board with all of your might. And that's how you get through. Or so I'm told. I've never done it before. But the metaphor is apt because so many of us, myself included, waste and have wasted effort and time to the order of months, years, decades, and lifetimes in exercising effort, so trying without an actual intention to arrive on the other side. It's incredible to imagine, but it's absolutely true. Instead, what we end up doing is creating busy work for ourselves. Or whenever we get really close to the edge of success, then suddenly we get distracted or we move on to something else. Or we find a way to sabotage it or throw it all away. Or maybe we get it and as soon as we have it, we just get so uncomfortable having it that we just find a way to just toss it aside and get rid of it or lose it somehow or whatever it is. So there's a part of us that feels intimidated by the level of success that we want to step into, that feels intimidated by having the completed song, article, business, whatever work of science, whatever result you're after. Writing something, having it written, having it being done, and having it be done to the quality that you believe is possible. There's something scary. And what could possibly be scary about it? Well, we'll get into specifics in a little bit, but there's a little bit of like, oh no, like if I become successful, then I become visible and I don't want people to look at me. Or it feels like there's suddenly a target on my back. People will come after me. Or if I succeed, then if I were to fail afterward, it would be even worse because I had succeeded to begin with. So it's like there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of reasons that we have for not succeeding, for not actually stepping into our success. There's a part of us that feels threatened, and it's okay to this part of ourselves to just talk about succeeding and to desire and fantasize about succeeding, or to berate and punish ourselves for not succeeding. But when it comes time to actually succeed, to actually complete the work and put it out into the world, suddenly it's like, nope, there's like this sort of, red light that comes on, and we figure out how to sabotage it. So that's something to keep in mind. We create friction in the creation process because we feel intimidated by what we're asking for, because our intention is split with an intention to actually reach and an intention to never ever reach. And so with a lot of honesty, can you detect that in yourself? Where do you say with your mouth? And I'm only saying this because this is my life, right? Because I'm only realizing with shock and embarrassment how operative it is in my life as well. Where are you saying that you're gonna, you intend to create some kind of success, but you actually have no intention of succeeding, and instead you're happy just to fail and never allow your plane to lift off the tarmac ever? And you're even kind of negotiating with yourself a little bit, like, if it turns out that my life is a total failure, I can be okay with that. I can be okay with it. I can make peace with it. But you're already making peace with it, but like near the beginning of your life or in the middle of your life, something to look at. So this is not a fault on the level of effort or intention. It's totally something else. So by now, hopefully, you're getting the sense that if you haven't succeeded so far, or if you haven't created your work, your piece of art, whatever it is, that it's not because of a shortcoming on the level of effort or intention. It would be a massive, massive victory of this video. In other words, this video would be considered a success, a total 100% success, if by the end of this video, you were to let yourself off the hook, to drop all of this self-abuse of like, why am I so lazy? Why can't I get my shit together? Why am I not doing it? What's wrong with me? I keep failing. I keep saying I'm gonna do it and then I don't do it, and I'm just so lazy, and there's all this like punishment of the self, berating of the self, that just makes everything so confusing and it's not helpful. It would be such a win if you were to put that down and realize, just because you're not completing your art, so just because there's friction in your creative process, that doesn't mean you're not trying hard enough. Would you be willing to let the truth of that sink in? It's not a fault on the level of your effort and your intention. Intention being, like, obviously on the deepest level you intend to succeed, but you just have a competing intention to not succeed. But it doesn't mean you're shortchanging yourself or failing yourself. The problem is on a different level that we're addressing just now. And in order to have our best shot at addressing that problem, we put self-abuse to rest. We bring on self-respect. We're like, okay, like, I respect myself, I deserve love, I deserve respect, and now I'm gonna figure out what it takes to fix this. Remember the original vision, the original knowing, the original intent. Very, very important. Full of the Holy Spirit right now. Feels good. Feels good. Remember your original knowing, your original intent, your original vision. Remember who you were when you made this original idea to become a musician, a writer, an artist, a creative, an influencer, an entrepreneur, a business creator, a freelancer. Remember the intention that you created at that time, and remember the vision. Remember how you saw the whole thing just prior to embarking on the project. When you looked at it in that moment, you knew it was possible. You knew that you could do it. You knew that it was in the cards for you, in the sense that it's a viable future that you absolutely can step into, and that's why you committed to it. Allow yourself to return to that and trust it. if you have to choose between the part of you that doubts your ability to create and the part of you that knows that you're able to create, and you're figuring out who is speaking the truth, I suggest this one. I suggest trusting the original vision, the original knowing that this is something that you can do and that you can create frictionlessly. And then finally, and this is, now we're going to get into the how-tos, the way to actually reduce the friction is to articulate the threat and nullify it. So we're going to get into that now. And so I'm going to share with you how to go about this process. I'm going to give you some tools to work with, and they work so well. And you should get your expectations high. So here are some ways that we feel threatened. So here's some threats that we have when it comes to our creation process, where when we're thinking of doing it, ultimately, we don't allow ourselves to actually finish it because of these. I will be judged by this. So there's a fear of, I'm going to make this and people will see it and they will judge me. I will be ridiculed. So people will see it, they'll see my authentic message, and then they will ridicule me. They'll get together in groups and they'll ridicule me. I could do such a bad job of this that I will get fired. Or I will do such a bad job of this that I will lose my opportunity. Like all my subscribers and listeners and viewers and readers and admirers and fans, however many, if it's just 7 of them or a couple thousand or whatever, they will all leave if I make this thing because it's going to be so bad. This is a threat that we harass ourselves with. I will get exiled or ostracized, so I'll be shut out of a group, I'll be shut out of a community that I'm trying to be a part of. I may not be as good as I thought, so what if I try really hard and then I end up creating the thing, but it's not as good as I thought it would be, and now I'm stuck with the knowing that it's actually not that good. I run the risk of failing myself or failing others. I run the risk of disappointing myself or disappointing others. Yeah, and those are the ones. I wonder if there are any others. So other ones would be, yeah, I'm afraid I'll suck. I'm afraid I'll succeed and then I'll fail and then it'll be really embarrassing. I'm afraid people will criticize me. So all of this stuff. So these are all, or I'm afraid that I will fail at my purpose. It just won't be good enough. I'm afraid nobody will care. I'm afraid nobody will look, nobody will buy, nobody will see, nobody will stick around. And so I'm going to share with you how to nullify these fears. So hopefully, as I mentioned a whole bunch of them, maybe I kind of poked at a few that are actually alive in you. And so I can actually talk you through this. So the way to dissolve and nullify a fear is to recognize that it's false. So we recognize that it's false kind of intellectually, where we're like, okay, yeah, it's not really a legitimate fear. And then we agree to because it's not a legitimate fear, to run the risk of experiencing it anyway. And then it becomes clear from there. So, excuse me, just gather my thoughts. So take this thing that you're afraid of. So what is it that freaks you out about doing this work? So when you think about, take a minute to actually think about doing your work, creating your art, and getting it done, and it's done, and you're looking at it, okay, now it's done, and you're posting it, or you're publishing it, and you're having people draw attention to it, so everybody's looking at it now. That brings up a lot for a lot of people, right? So it's like, oh, freak out, right? So what makes you freak out about that? Get clear on what is the threat. What's threatening about it? Oh, I'm afraid they won't like it, I'm afraid they'll hate me, I'm afraid they'll get mad at me, what is it? Okay, good. So that's number one. Now, number two is this fear legitimate? Like, do you truly believe, according to the most intelligent, intellectually frontal lobe element of you, do you actually believe it would play out like this? Do you think it's a legitimate thing that might happen? Yes or no? And generally the answer, like if it's like a worst case scenario, the answer is no. If there's a fear that like somebody will view it and not like it, the answer is yes. Like very, 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 very likely somebody will view it and not like it. Totally likely. And so then the next step would be would you be willing to experience this nevertheless? Would you be willing to step into this experience? So would you be willing to step into the experience of everybody hates me? everybody hates what I did, or nobody likes what I did, or I'm not good enough, I can't do this. Stepping into the experience of I can't do this. Because again, none of this is true in like the most foundational sense. For example, this idea, I'll never be good, I'm going to find out that I suck. Well, it's not true because whatever you are, you just keep improving until you're as good as you want to be, right? So it's not a legitimate fear, it's just something that we say to ourselves. And so we depolarize around the energy of fear. So we dissolve all this fear energy by stepping into it willingly. We say, okay, yes, I'm willing to experience somebody not liking this. I'm willing to experience failure. I'm willing to experience disappointment. I'm willing to experience the possibility that I will never, ever be good. And you move into it, not with like aggression, but you move into it with just congruence, with a sense of like, yes, like if this is in the cards for me, then let's have it. Thy will be done, if we were to go biblical on it. Let's do this. Whatever it is, if there's a monster in the closet, then you better come out and kill me right now, because I'm tired of being scared of a monster in the closet. There's a sense of yes, a green light to whatever experience lies just beyond the curtain of what happens when you put your work out. And so if you do this, then you can close your eyes and just be with the experience of that fear, and you just breathe into it. You just go, as you continue to say yes to the fear, yes to the possibility of this happening. And then what happens eventually is there's like, you'll go through sort of a fear spike, but then you'll find yourself on the other side where from this depolarized lens, you can look at it and go, oh, I see, it's just an experience. If somebody doesn't like this, it just means that they don't like it. And that's all it means. It doesn't mean anything else besides this. It doesn't mean that I suck or that I will always fail, or it doesn't mean anything else. But what we want to do is, it's not that we want to step into the experience of failure, but it's we're depolarizing about the possibility of failure. So it doesn't have to threaten us. Because whenever we feel threatened by our creative process, then there's conflict. That's the pulling back, because like one part of you is making the art or making the work, and there's this other part of you that's like, no, 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 and it's like pulling back, because it is convinced that it's gonna die. It's convinced that it's moving into its death, into its worst fear. What would you do? You would pull back with everything you have. You would disallow. So we dissolve the friction by moving into the fear. We go, okay, here's fear. Okay, here's fear. Okay, fear of failure. Okay, I'm willing to experience failure. I'm like, let's go. Let's have some failure. Let's have some double failure. Let's have some triple failure or triple embarrassment. I'm willing to experience embarrassment. Let's move into embarrassment, and just kind of move into it. And through like the congruent, very still, non-judgmental, grounded gazing down the barrel of the gun at the thing you're scared of, that's how the fear is nullified, and that's how your power returns to you. So a final piece is this. There is a tool from the healing modality called Access Consciousness called Interesting Point of View. So whatever is your belief about your work, say that in interesting point of view. I've spoken about this in other videos, so I'll just really quickly go over it just now. So what is your belief about your art? So it's like, I'm afraid that I'm invalid, I'm an illegitimate movie maker, or I'm an illegitimate actor, I'm not the real deal, I'm a fraud, I'm an imposter. I'm an imposter, I'm not the real thing. I'm just a pretender. Which is funny because that's what you are as an actor, but you get what I'm saying. So you go, interesting point of view, I'm a fraud. Interesting point of view, I'm an imposter. Interesting point of view, I'm not the real deal. Interesting point of view, nobody wants to hire me. Interesting point of view, nobody cares about me. Interesting point of view, nobody's interested in looking at me or my work. And you just say interesting point of view and the fear, and then you can remind yourself in a very visceral way that you're just dealing with your own points of view, your own prejudice. It's not necessarily true, And it's not possible for you to see that because your beliefs are so, you've made them into so large that you can barely see behind you, that you can barely see behind the thing itself. So I'm running out of battery, so I'm running out, excuse me, I'm running out of space, so I better wrap this up. So interesting point of view, run it on everything. In order to be highly productive and step into actualization, believe in and really set your sights on frictionless output. It is possible for you, number one. Number two, don't make the mistake of thinking we need more willpower. It's less friction. That's where your leverage is. Number three, friction is created by pushing forward and pulling backward. So look at where your intention is split and you have split intention that's keeping you locked in place. Number four, this is not your fault on the level of intention or effort. You're abundantly good in effort and intention. You need to look elsewhere. Number five, remember the original vision. Stay tuned to the original knowing, the original intention that you can do this and that this is for you to do. And number six is articulate the threats and nullify them with interesting point of view and just step into the fear directly, knowing that there's nothing to be afraid of. And that's it. Okay, thank you for hanging with me. I hope this was helpful for you. Let me know. I believe it was, hopefully. I think so. Sign up for my email list, get my full training on sustainable high-level productivity.